Hey, welcome back, everybody. Mark from Rams Up here. It's been a minute, but we do have something important to talk about this episode. The Rams have signed their top draft pick, second round pick, Terrance Ferguson, the tight end out of Oregon. And this is a pretty big deal. We need to get him signed, and they did before camp starts on the 22nd. Now, Ian had talked extensively an episode ago about how this NFL union collusion case, NFL Players Association leadership colluding with the owners about guaranteed money, and how this had delayed the signing of a bunch of second round picks. But things are starting to happen on that front. And Ferguson is in camp, will be in camp, signed per his agent, a $9.7 million contract, $8 million guaranteed. This is just really good news for this offense. I think the Rams are probably going to be potentially impacted more than any other team if second round picks are not in camp, because he is indeed their top pick. So this is a really good development. Need these rookies in camp, especially a tight end. Need to keep the train moving along. This is a roster that's built to win the Super Bowl, and Terrance Ferguson could be a big part of that. So, we got that great tight end room, and we might have been okay without him for a while. But man, this is Terrance Ferguson has a potential to be a really big impact player. Don't expect it day one, don't expect it by week two, but at some point, Terrance Ferguson is going to elevate this offense. I really strongly believe that. Let's get through some other news and notes. We got the good news behind us. Anything else we want to talk about? Well, that TJ Watt rumor mill will end. He has signed with the Steelers, $123 million 3-year contract. Seems like a lot of money, but the Rams have been in this situation. You have an iconic player who has just played so well for your franchise for years. And yeah, sure, they're getting up there in years, but you kind of got to sign these guys. It's really difficult to walk away from them, especially if their play has not deteriorated. And TJ Watt's play has not, as opposed to someone like Cooper Kupp, who seems to have slowed up a little bit. So that Steeler defense, they're in a tough division with the Ravens and Bengals. See what the Browns do. One of the tougher divisions in the league. And this defense is going to be special. Now, the offense, there's some odd things going on that side of the ball with, DK Metcalf and Aaron Rodgers, among other guys. It's going to be interesting dynamics there. But this defense with Watt back on board is going to be really special. Wide receiver Mike Williams, so the Chargers, retires. And, to me, it's kind of odd time to retire. Now, maybe the Chargers saw this coming. Maybe the Chargers were starting to phase him out anyways. I don't keep my finger on the pulse of the Chargers that much, so I don't know what's going on with that wide receiver room. And maybe it's not that big a deal, but it still seems like, if you're going to retire before the free agency or before the draft. But maybe in this case, it doesn't really matter that much. And then Lloyd Howe, the executive director of the NFL Players Association, has resigned. And this goes back to that collusion case again. This is just a really bad look for the Players Association, the leadership, to be, apparently, allegedly colluding with the owners, avoiding paying guaranteed money to players. They're supposed to be representing the interest of the players, obviously, and that wasn't happening. Apparently, allegedly, get that out there, allegedly. And Hal just decided it was best for everybody if he stepped aside, and that's probably a good call on his part. Now, Behind the Grind, episode 3, a lot of these shows that the Rams put on, I find them interesting when they talk. The parts that I find interesting are where they talk to Les Snead, scouts and coaches about players, especially draft picks. Some of that stuff's really cool. This episode, Camp Maui, as they called it, a lot of fluff, but it was still kind of fun, I guess. The golfing part of it was interesting. 3 takeaways for me, though. I really felt bad for that congresswoman getting up there and trying to get everybody pumped up, and then referring to Merlin Olsen as the great defensive linebacker. Not a big deal, but hopefully somebody sets some of the younger players straight. They don't come away thinking that Merlin Olsen was a linebacker, because some of them probably don't even know who he is. Merlin Olsen, one of the greatest defensive tackles in the history of the league. So, not going to throw shade on the Congresswoman. You can't expect them to, maybe it's just a minor detail, but she did get that wrong. And the second takeaway, I really relate it to Brennan Jackson on the one green. Obviously aware that some good stuff was going on with another group, and pointing out that, hey, they can have all their Eagles. We're having a better time down here. And that's speaking to me. I'm telling you, you can have a ton of fun on a golf course with triple bogeying your way around 18 holes. Who needs Eagles? And then my third takeaway, if you were to ask me who the best putter on a football team is, the best putter, I'd probably pick the field goal kicker, and Joshua Carty seemed to be doing pretty good there. And it just makes sense, right? The field goal kicker is your best putter. It makes perfect sense to me. Now, it is episode 782. We're going to talk about a player who wore number 82, and that is Red Phillips. And the interesting thing about Red Phillips is he's the forgotten guy, a really forgotten guy. 6'1", 197 pounds, out of Auburn. He was a first-round pick in the 1958 draft, the 5th overall by the Rams, played 7 years with the Rams and 3 years with the Vikings. In 1958, Phillips led the NFL with the longest reception of the season, 93 yards. In 1961, he led the NFL in total receptions with 78 and ranked third in receiving yards, over 1,000 yards. Remember, this is a much shorter season back then. Finished his Ram career with 333 catches, 4,953 yards, and 27 TDs, a three-time Pro Bowler. And why do I call him the forgotten man? Because all these great receivers the Rams have had, most of them ranked above him. Most Ram fans are really unaware of Red Phillips and how good he was. I mean, Isaac Bruce, Torry Holt, Tom Fears, Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch, Jack Snow, Henry Ellard, Flipper Anderson, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nakua, and, Red Phillips, he's right up there with all those guys, and a guy that most Ram fans are probably unaware of. And by the way, 100 episodes ago, I did talk about Bobby Duckworth and that famous call by John Madden. That's not a pass to Duckworth. That's a duck to Passworth. That was the championship game against the Bears and the win there. Dieter Brock to Bobby Duckworth. Incomplete, needless to say. But so 282s in the book. Bobby Duckworth and Red Phillips, my number 82 this time around for the Los Angeles Rams. And by the way, I meant to mention, a writer for NFL Spin Zone ranked the NFL cornerback duos. And this is Sarah Bettinger, probably butchering his name, but I did want to mention this. Go back here. He ranked the NFL cornerback pairings, and the Rams came in at 29th. That's Witherspoon and Darius Williams. And as he put it, the Rams had the best of the worst cornerback duos in the NFL. Williams and Witherspoon have proven themselves capable, but the ceiling is lower than most duos around the league, and the floor is also lower than most. They need the pass rush to be elite, to be at their best. And I think that's a fair assessment. Now, 29th seems a little bit lower than it should be. I checked some of these other duos, and I'd probably actually rank Witherspoon and Williams ahead of the 49ers, who came in at the mid-20s. But I'm not going to get spun up about that ranking. I think it's a fair assessment. Maybe the ranking's a little bit lower than it should be, though. What else we got here? I wanted to talk about a camp battle as we get closer to training camp. We talked about the running backs a little while ago. And what about the fourth safety? And discounting Quentin Lake for a moment. We have Cam Kinchins, Cam Curl, and Jalen McCullough. They appear to be the top three. Quentin Lake listed as a safety, except on the depth chart where he's listed elsewhere. Let's just call him a DB. And then there's three guys, I think, that are battling for a roster spot. And I think one of them is going to end up on this roster. And those three guys, three undrafted free agents, Tanner Ingle from 2023, Malik Dixon Williams, and Nate Valcarcel, both from this past draft, went undrafted. Now, Ingle, 5'8", but 195. That's a pretty fairly short for a safety, but dude must be stout at 195 pounds, out of North Carolina State, already 25 years old, and he can play the slot, maybe a little short for it, but he could play the slot, and he's been on the Rams practice squad since 2023. The highlight of his college career, 2021, first team All ACC. And then there's Valcarcel. By the way, Ingle and Valcarcel are listed as free safeties on the depth charts I've seen. Well, the third guy, Malik Dixon Williams, is listed as a strong safety. Valcarcel comes in at 6'1", 192 out of Northern Illinois. He intercepted 6 passes, which were returned 95 yards, and had 9 pass breakups at Northern Illinois. Transitioned from a backup cornerback and special teams player to starting safety over his 4 years there. So another guy with some flexibility, maybe even more so than Ingle. I could see a 6'1", 192-pound safety getting by at cornerback potentially, or maybe in the slot. And then Malik Dixon Williams listed as a strong safety, 6'1", 200 pounds. He's out of UConn. 5 years there, 258 tackles and 7 interceptions. And he's definitely a guy with special teams abilities as well. Am I going to make a prediction here? That's impossible to do. And I don't think we're going to be able to figure it out watching preseason games, because you know how the Rams roll. If you're playing every down in the preseason, this actually means you might not be making this team. You could be making plays all over the field. But if you're a guy that gets in for a couple series and then takes a seat, that may mean they have you penciled in for some a good shot at making this 53-man roster. But all three of these guys, if they're your fourth safety, you could do a lot worse. Again, discounting Quentin Lake here for a moment. But I see these three guys, one of them making this roster. Not going to make a prediction here. Tanner Ingle, guy that's a little more experienced, they probably feel more comfortable with. Malik Dixon Williams might be the best special teams player. And Valcarcel, a guy that offers a lot of flexibility and can play special teams too. So we will keep an eye on that one. And hey, I like to play around with ChatGPT and see how ChatGPT is doing, compare it to my knowledge. And I bounced onto ChatGPT the other day when I had a discussion comparing Aaron Donald to Mean Joe Green. And I was calling Aaron Donald not only the best defensive lineman in the history of the game, the best player, period, regardless of position, showing my Ram bias there. And this Steeler fan was, I had a friendly back and forth banter with him. I asked ChatGPT who is the best defensive tackle in the history of the National Football League, and the answer was 1, Aaron Donald, 2, Mean Joe Green. So ChatGPT nailed that one. Then I asked it, what was the greatest NFL offense ever? And they came up with 3 candidates. The first one was the 2013 Broncos, 606 points scored. Peyton Manning, 5,477 yards passing and 55 TDs. They did, however, lose in the Super Bowl to the Seahawks. Then there was the 2007 Patriots, 589 points. Tom Brady, 50 TDs. Randy Moss, 23 TDs. This is a team that went 16-0 in the regular season and lost to the Giants in the Super Bowl. And then the third choice, and I don't think they're necessarily ranking them, just offering three options here. The 1999 St. Louis Rams, greatest show on turf, 528 points. Kurt Warner, 41 TDs, 4,353 yards. Marshall Faulk, over 2,400 yards from scrimmage. And they won the Super Bowl. And the summary was, they threw some kudos to the Broncos and Patriots, but said, hey, the fact that the Rams won the Super Bowl, got to give the nod to the greatest show on turf. So ChatGPT rounding into form as far as I'm concerned. And what did they say actually about the greatest show on turf? Balanced dominance, could beat you through the air and on the ground, fast-paced, spread offense ahead of its time. Absolutely true. Okay. And speaking of ChatGPT, I also asked it about some wide receiver comparisons, and it got me thinking again about the Steelers. We talk about in that conversation about Mean Joe Green and Aaron Donald, I made the comment that a lot of Steelers and Cowboys just end up being overrated because of their franchises, and I really believe that. And I got to thinking about overrated players and underrated players, and thinking about the Hall of Fame and the fact that Torry Holt is not in the Hall of Fame, but you know who is? Steelers wide receiver Lynn Swann. And this is a great example of a player, Lynn Swann I'm talking about, who landed on a very successful franchise, didn't do anything remarkable during the regular season, had some big-time catches in playoff games and Super Bowls, and ends up in the Hall of Fame. And to me, there's no comparison. Torry Holt was a greater player, and I don't think it's even close. And I went and looked at some data here. 1,000-yard seasons, Lynn Swann, 0. Torry Holt, 8. Pro Bowls, Lynn Swann, 3, and even that surprises me. Torry Holt, 7. Career yardage, Lynn Swann, 5,462 yards. Think about that number for a second. 5,462. Torry Holt, 13,382 yards. Receptions, 336 for Lynn Swann, 920 for Torry Holt. Career TDs, Lynn Swann, 51, Torry Holt, 74. Now, if you're thinking that Torry Holt has had a longer career, no, not really the case. Yards per game, Lynn Swann, 47.1 yards. 47.1 yards, Hall of Fame wide receiver. Torry Holt, 77.4. And let's think about those receptions for a minute for Lynn Swann, a Hall of Fame wide receiver, 336 catches in his career. That's less than Nelson Aguilar has in his career. So I don't know, man. This is just another great argument for Torry Holt belonging in the Hall of Fame, and another case of where, players on championship teams just get promoted to as far as awards and recognition, and sometimes extremely unfair. Torry Holt belongs in the Hall of Fame, and I'll argue that. I'll argue that all day long. Torry Holt is a greater wide receiver than Lynn Swann and belongs in the Hall of Fame. That's all I'm going to say about that. Out here, I'm sure Ian's going to jump on sometime and talk about the Terrance Ferguson signing and what that means, or maybe we'll save that for, our Wednesday night recording. We'll see. But out here from Rams Up, really good day, productive day. The Rams sign Terrance Ferguson. He'll be in camp on the 22nd at Loyola Marymount. All systems go for the 2025 LA Rams.